I think it's an obvious question, at least for someone first being confronted with these icons, which you don't see in any other Orthodox national iconographic program, as best I understand, as best I know.
Mhm.
So what motivated the Moldavians to paint the exteriors of their churches? And what's the consensus on that? Because is it not an innovation, relatively speaking, compared to other traditional forms of iconographic decoration?
Well, some do say this is obviously very different from other churches. Uh, these rulers, I think, were trying to express their gratitude to God in some ways by building all these churches. And sometimes it just seemed like they just wanted to beautify even more for the glory of God. There is a tradition now. There are a few, I believe, a few Romanian monasteries that are not in Romania. I think there is one in America that has decided to use this iconographical program.
To respond to that, I mean, they just to build that church without exterior iconography is itself an extraordinary monument. So I don't think you would not think that they should have felt that they had failed in some way to express their gratitude for their victories in battle, the depth of their faith, whatever. But so once again, it seems at some point there must have been an inspiration that besides an interior iconographic program, we can do something on the exterior as well.
I think that also the fact that invaders would try to come and these icons would sort of provide a defense, seeing that these people believe in something so much more. They're very inspiring. So I don't think that any group of invaders that would come across these monasteries would be left with no thoughts about them.
Can you say something very briefly about the interior program, iconographic program? Are they as ornately painted on the inside as they are on the outside?
So what's funny is the inside, they aren't as bright because of the time and obviously candles and sensors. The exterior somehow has remained very bright and well preserved because they did come up with some sort of formula. It's very hard to find this formula now. And that's why they're not even, there are some iconographers who wanted to try to repaint certain areas, but they just can't come up with the right formula to be able to preserve them. But they're already pretty well preserved. There are a few that I did not put pictures of that are more weathered.
If I'm not mistaken, because of the relatively the small number of windows here, the interiors must be very dark in these churches.
Yes, very dark. So that does, limit light.
And so that would, and you said that the interior, whatever program is there, is obscured by smoke. Obviously, the darkness also makes it less visible. Is it as elaborate as this? Are all of the walls covered as all of these exterior walls are covered?
Yes, they are. All the walls are covered, and it follows a traditional iconographic program that we would see in every Orthodox church.
Looks like Father Peter has a question over here.
Thank you, Teodora. Wonderful talk. So I'm certainly not an expert, but I did have the blessing to visit the Rila Monastery where St. John lived in Bulgaria, and that is also covered with icons and in the exterior walls. And the monk who was explaining them to us showed us several examples of themes in icons that would not be really appropriate for the interior of a church, but was educational. For instance, the one that really struck us was an angel writing the names of people as they entered the church, and then people that left before the end of the service, he was crossing their names off. So obviously, and there were a lot of icons of parables, and I mean, not that they're not appropriate for the interior of a church, but they were, at a very, very, I guess, simple level, not very symbolic level, but very simple, so that you could imagine, like you said, just people coming and looking at the icons and being able to understand references to biblical stories, in a very transparent way.
Yes.
On the exterior of the church.
I do believe Rila Monastery, though, I think they do have exterior paintings, but it's sort of in the exonarthex, so it's covered. It's not on the actual facades of the church, if I remember correctly.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very, very lovely. I was wondering if there was a time frame for how long it would take the iconographer to work on the interior and exterior of the churches, and if it was typically just like one or two iconographers, or if they had a team, and also if that formula, you said it was lost now, right? We don't know how they managed to preserve them.
Yes. So I think it does vary from church to church. As I mentioned, I know the Humor Monastery and I believe Moldovica were painted by an iconographer named Toma. And of course, the exterior, I don't think any of the churches were painted just by one particular iconographer, but for sure a team. Although there might have been one iconographer who was in charge of the program and instructing the others. I don't know, it varied. Some churches, as Voronezh, was built in 4 months, and I think was also painted. I think it took about a year for them to paint it, if not less. But the voivodes really spent like a lot of time and focus on building them. So they hired as many people, I think, as they could to finish as quickly as possible.
Your Eminence, I think you had a question?
Back to the possible reason for this dramatic, extraordinary elaboration of iconography on the exterior of the church and the reasons, the possible uses of it and so on. I note that the floor plan is very small in these churches, and I do recall having, when I did visit there a long time ago, that I was struck by how high and the churches were on the interior, but also how narrow they were. And you can see the massive thickness of the walls as well to support that weight, the roof, whatever. And I wondered if, historically, if there's any record of, at least for feast and large events, for people having to congregate on the exterior of the church as opposed to the interior, and thus the necessity for iconography being available for them as they, observed a great festal event.
Yes, I think that's very possible. You are correct, and the walls of the church are very thick. So some of these churches do look quite big on the outside, but once you walk in, it seems very narrow and very small because of the thickness of the wall, the different walls. And so I do think these churches were probably had a great congregation come for certain feast days. But monasteries were also places where people would always just go and either venerate the relics or just participate in the services of the monastics. There was a lot of interaction between the two. Obviously, monasteries would have their own privacy, but laity would always visit monasteries. And especially, they, like I mentioned, they were the first schools. So, probably holding classes and whatnot. Yes. So I think there are many other reasons for the exterior frescoes, but I do think one of the main purposes is for catechetical purposes. A lot of the people of Romania were illiterate, and so that provides them with a visual aid. Yes.
Looks like another question in the back.
Thank you, Theodora. So I had several questions, but some of them have been answered already. So I will go to the question is, how many of them have you visited yourself? And do you have a favorite? And why is it your favorite?
So I actually, the three that I chose to describe more in depth are the three that I have actually visited in person. So I knew that I could speak a little more on behalf of those churches. I have not been to the other ones. What was the second part to your question? Oh, favorite. I think that's very hard. I think I like them for different things. Voronezh, I really love that blue color. But it is one of the smaller churches. Moldovica, I would say, is probably, I think either Voronezh or Moldovica were the two that are my favorite. I just think, I don't know, I just, when I went there, it really impressed me. And not that Sucevica didn't, but there was just something that I felt there was very spectacular.
As far as you know, are those the original roofs? It's kind of a trick question, so go ahead. Give me your best shot.
I would probably, you know, I'm not sure.
I mean, obviously, shingles would certainly be replaced, and maybe even some of the timbers.
In my research, I have not found anything speaking particularly about.
Well, I'm asking
the
because,
roofs.
as you pointed out, most of these churches were first built and were. One you mentioned was only painted some 80 years later, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. So there was one church that was, the original church was destroyed by an earthquake, and then was built in the same area, but a few meters uphill. And I think each of these monasteries had some sort of original building, but either very small, or it seems that these there were already establishments, and so it was just a rebuilding of churches and monasteries for the particular monastic community.
Okay, are the roofs meant to be protecting the icons? That's what I'm going for.
Oh, well,
You
they
have
are
that's a
very.
It's a very
Umbrella.
extended drip edge, as they say,
Yes.
for.
Well, this style, this model is known to be Stephen the Great's model. And so in all the churches, even the ones that are not painted on the exterior, have this same plan,
Yeah.
architectural plan.
So as far as we know, the original roofs were always extended like this. This was
Yes.
something that
Yes.
by Stephen the Great himself that he
Mhm.
implemented.
And I think
What's
I
the
didn't.
influence for that?
I'm not sure.
Is it practical for the sake of snow? But then again, you don't see this in Russia very often.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't do justice in showing how many of the other churches are very weathered. I showed the three that are the most preserved. So, yes, if I included some of the other ones, you would have seen, I think it took some time to find that formula. So these churches might have been some of the ones that were painted more towards the end, once they have found a formula that made the paintings last longer.
What is the climate in that part of northern Moldova? Like,
My mother would say I think it's on the same same line as New York. So it's about similar to the weather that you would have in New York.
There's a question in the back, it looks like.
Teodora, can't
Oh.
see you, but I have one question about Saint Stephen the Great. Why did they take so long to glorify him? That's very unusual for, what, 500 years?
Yes. Well, so Saint Stephen the Great, he was a religious man and did a lot for, building the churches, obviously. There are some people that were very against him because he had multiple wives, he had a lot of illegitimate children. The fact that he did have to fight, and he had multiple battles. He was known for his battles and, the killing of people. So I think there was a reserve because of these reasons. That's what I know, but I'm not sure if there are more reasons to that.
All right, are there any more questions? Mother Kipperini.
Not really a question, more of a comment. Again, just as Teodora says, I mean, that she's showing the best examples of these churches, but having grown up in Sweden, gone to a lot of Lutheran churches that also are frescoed on the inside, and obviously we see Orthodox churches too, but you find churches that are a lot less in age than these, and where the frescoes on the inside are totally destroyed. And so it is quite amazing to see these churches, even though, as Teodora says, that are, there are many churches where the frescoes are destroyed on the outside. But to see these icons on these churches are just incredible. Anyway, it's more of a comment. And thank you, Teodora. It's very interesting.
And it looks like Timothy has a question in the back too.
Thank you, Teodora. Wonderful lecture. I was wondering about the floor plan of these churches, or the ceiling plan of the churches. You mentioned that unlike many Orthodox churches that have a central dome, these churches have a large tower at the center often. And I was wondering if that makes any difference to the ceiling plan on the inside. Is there a dome beneath or inside these towers, or is it a different structure entirely?
No, there still is a dome inside which would have the Pantocrator icon. I just think that instead of being round and having the pendentives, it is just more rectangular, but would still follow the iconographic program of the inside of a church.
And would there be a bell tower? Like a
So
compartment
yes,
above?
not in the church. It'd probably be attached to the brick wall surrounding the church grounds, where they would have, lookout towers, but would also use as bell towers.
I first want to say thank you for your lecture. I found it very educative and very interesting. I just want to ask, is there a program, or how often do they renovate or keep the icons in good condition every year? Do they do like a checkup on them every year to prevent weathering and such?
I think there have been many iconographers and scientists trying to figure out how to further preserve these icons, but again, obviously iconographers have not been really able to come up with that formula to fill in anything. It is protected by the UNESCO World Heritage, so they do pay in order to keep the grounds clean and to protect them in any way they can. I'm not so sure that they actually do any sort of work, physical work restoration for them. But obviously they are protected. So if something were to happen to them, they would try to restore them as best as they could.
Specific church, they've maintained that same color and condition for how many years?
Yeah, since 500 years.
All right. Well, Teodora, thank you so much, and thank you for giving us a reason to want to visit all of these monasteries now.
Of course, thank you.